Wow, thank you very much. That's a really long bio. No man should have all that power. Um, Thank you for having me here. And initially, I wanted to wear a suit, but I forgot my white shirt. So the plan was to wear a suit, tie, and make sure the tie reaches this place, so I can get into my full aspire to perspire mode. So at least you guys are inspired. But thankfully, I forgot my white shirt, so I had to just wear this. And so I won't be doing aspire to perspire anymore, like I had initially planned. I would rather just be vulnerable with my story. So it's very relatable. So you know how all of this happened and how I got here. My name is Tunde Onakoya. I'm a national master of chess. And beyond everything else that has been mentioned here, I'm a dreamer. And I believe in a future that includes all of us. This journey started some 16 years ago, and a lot has happened since then, right? But while I'm a full-time chess coach, I'm also a part-time area boy, and that's why I'm wearing this cap. It has this special significance. I'm sure for a few people that follow me on Twitter, you understand what the cap means. And so the journey that started 16 years ago was in Ikorodu in Lagos. Ikorodu is a slum. I grew up in a slum community in Ikorodu in Lagos called the Odo, a riverine community. Is anyone from Ikorodu here? Anyone from Ikorodu? Let's give her a round of applause. Is she? Okay. So I grew up in the Odo, and we grew up in poverty. When I say poverty, in its purest form, and poverty isn't just not having money. It's just deeply ingrained in one's psychology. And you just have a completely different mindset. I grew up in a very small place, and it was very difficult because every day was a struggle. My parents were uneducated, so they didn't really understand the value of education. But they taught us very important values, even as a child. And that is something I will never take for granted. So after my primary six education, I went to one Paco school like that, and I couldn't even speak English when I was 10 years old, right? So I was always this very shy kid that was afraid to express himself. After my primary six education, something happened. My dad used to be a bus driver, these downfall buses. So the bus had an accident, and a lot of things just went wrong, and we lost our only means of livelihood. So I had to drop out of school for 2 years. When I was at home for 2 years, I didn't go to school. I was learning how to repair phones. And something happened that changed the trajectory of my life, and I discovered something. So I used to go to this barbering salon then to play video games, To the MC, I also started with PS1. So don't worry, you'd advance. So we used to go there to play PS1 then, and on one of those days, he just brought out a small plastic chess set. And I'd never seen a chessboard before. And I was curious. I wanted to know what it was. And it was like, oh, this is only for smart people and you're too young and all of that. I was a very curious child. So he just kept watching. Whenever his friends came around, he would sit down very quietly and it was as if he was talking to himself. And I thought, what is it about this game that was so captivating? Because for me, it was love at first sight because of the way the pieces were carved. And I just wanted to know everything about it. And from just watching them, I was able to pick up the rules of the game. And I learned how to play chess from watching. At the time, I didn't know that was the most important thing I was going to ever do for my future. Just because I was curious enough. And that changed everything. Eventually, I go back to school because my mom made a sacrifice for me to work as a cleaner in a private school. And she just brought a child and said, please let him just go here. And I started school. And thankfully, the school I attended had they had chess as part of the curriculum. So we actually learned chess as a subject because the owner of the school was, I think, the ambassador to Kenya. and he had a foundation. He played chess when he was younger. So I just fit right in, and my coach discovered I was gifted. And I won tournaments, I did well. From a child that was afraid to talk, chess gave me an identity. And that's the first thing. I had an intellectual identity. There's this saying, they say, know thyself, right? Know what you're made of. It is very important that you're very honest with who you are, with the things you have the capacity to do. What chess gave me at the time was an identity that a boy from the slums of Ikorodu could also be intellectually inclined, right? That I could do something with my mind and I could be really good at it. And I was good at chess. And that eventually translated to other things because it gave me the confidence to think that if I could do this, I could do anything else. Because my coach would always say, oh, chess is for highly intelligent people and all of that. He told me about people that played it, people that I'd never heard of before from my little place in Ikorodu. And chess gave me a way to see the world differently. And that changed my life. Even while I was in the slums of Ikorodu, I saw a world that was much broader. And a world that transcended the confines of that environment, of that community. And I went on to school, on a scholarship, partial scholarship, because I was on a college chess team. I went pro. I was ranked number 13 in Nigeria. I got my national master title, and I did well competitively. But chess doesn't put food on the table here in Nigeria because there are very few tournaments. So I wanted to travel and become a grandmaster, but that didn't happen because we're still very poor. And things just went from bad to worse over the years. And in 2015, something happened. My parents had to leave Lagos and go back to the village, and it was just me there. I just got back from school. So I needed to get a job because I was the first child to provide for my family, yeah? And I had an idea. Oh, let me start teaching chess in schools too, because I benefited from chess as an educational resource. And let me just start pitching into schools, right? And I put a proposal together and start. I used to live in Ikorodu, so I'll wake up very early, go to Lekki. 2015 was the first time I was on the island, So I saw high-rise buildings, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I wanted to be in places like that. And a lot of them didn't take me seriously. They just said, no, chess? What do you mean chess? We can't add it to the curriculum. Maybe we can employ you as a chess coach and give you 20K at the end of the month. But I took it regardless because I was very passionate about the idea of using chess as an educational tool. And I did it for 3 years, between 2015 and 2018. And I did it very passionately. I wasn't earning a lot, yeah? But in that time, I trained over 3,000 children. I worked with so many schools. I had no cheekbone because I always had to wake up very early, It was a struggle. And in 2018, I decided to give up because I was struggling and I wasn't getting rewarded for it. But I loved what I did. I loved it very much. It gave me a way to connect with children and help them discover a part of themselves that they didn't know that they had. And but it wasn't enough. So I decided I was going to give up, do another professional IT course, and Chakpa. I wanted to run away from this wayward country at the time. But something happened again. So me and my friend were planning to escape. So we're going to escape through a tournament in London. We're already planning. The only thing I didn't have was money, so I was begging everybody I knew, I couldn't even gather the money at the time. But he got his own and he went for the tournament, he traveled and he's still there in the UK now. But something happened that stopped me while I was making those plans. I remember after church service on one day, I used to play piano, in a band. So my friends wanted to go to a slum community in Ikorodu to smoke. And I didn't smoke anyway, but they were hiding it from me. I didn't care. But on that day, I insisted I was going to go with them. And I went with them, and when I got there, they were just smoking. It was in the community not too far from where I grew up. And there were children there too, smoking, everybody. And I just had that moment of epiphany. It just occurred to me that I was once like this. I was once a child in this community. And a lot of the young people that we grew up together ended up getting into drugs, crimes, Yahoo and all of that. But chess made me different because it gave me an intellectual identity. And with that, I knew that I had to do better because I had been given information that was different from everyone else's. And I saw the children, and it bothered me so much that the world is evolving. And for them, the idea of success was a Yahoo boy in their community that bought Benz or bought iPhone. And they would never get to know that there's a world much larger than that. That there are opportunities that transcend, where they presently were. And I knew that the culprit here was poverty, because the poverty of their parents had chosen a path for them. And I knew how that felt like. I knew what it meant to be hungry. And on that day, while the guys were smoking and talking, I made a decision to come back here. I was even jobless at the time. I was like, okay, so the children that don't go to school, instead of them to just be smoking here, I can engage them and start teaching them chess. And I made that decision in January 2018. So that was what happened, and for most people, it's called finding purpose, yeah? And I believe in God, I believe it is God that gives purpose that suits the nature of a man. And it was important that I had that backstory before deciding on what my purpose was going to be. So, the problems you're meant to solve, they're not too far off from the problems that you have intimately experienced. They're not too far apart, right? And this is where you understand, at that intersection, where your own privilege, intersects with another person's oppression. That is where you find the opportunities to make true change. And I understood that in depth. And I said I was going to come and take a chance on these children and start teaching them. And that was the best decision I ever made for myself. I didn't know that at the time. And people asked, how will chess put food on the table? What do you mean chess? You'll be giving them food or something, in a poor community like this. And I didn't have an answer to that question at the time. Because I just thought, okay, let me teach them. At least, for the first time, they'll get to engage their mind critically, start thinking, and to start solving problems. Poverty is not a lack of resources. Trust me. It's a mindset. And I saw an opportunity to change that mindset using chess as a tool to help the children know that it is indeed possible to do great things from a small place. And from as simple as a chessboard, that their dreams can actually take flight from that community. And I was convinced about this idea. I had unwavering faith in this idea. In fact, I was a little delusional because when people ask how would they put food on the table, I would say it won't put food on the table because even me, Tapa was still dealing with me at the time. But I'll tell you something, right? It will give them an identity. And when we think about children in slums, if you close your eyes and you try to imagine, what comes to mind is a picture of a child maybe that is malnourished and in tattered clothes. That is a child in poverty in Africa. That is how children in poverty in Africa are represented. And I wanted to change the world's perception of that was that children that live in these places that are vulnerable shouldn't be defined by their background or what they look like, but they should instead be defined by what they have the ability to do. And that changes the entire premise of the conversation, because when you see a child in poverty with mastery of chess, you'd respect that child. It is not going to be another poor child in poverty, no. But that child now has an identity, now has a place in the world. That was the idea that I had. And I knew it wasn't going to bring any reward for me because the children could never pay me for the lessons. So I took the few chessboards and I kept going to the community every week. I even resigned from church. I told my choir director that I want to dedicate my Saturdays and Sundays to being here, to spending time with these children, to help them gain mastery of chess. And maybe someday one of them will become a champion and people will pay attention to the dreams of these little ones. And that was the idea I had, and I just kept doing it. From 2018, I called my friends. We started like 5 children, became 10, became 100, because after every training session, we used to give the kids food. A lot of them used to come only for the food, but that was okay, because for most of them, it was the only meal they will ever get to eat the entire day. So I'll just tell my friends, we'll gather 1K, 2K, 2K, buy gala and this long, this thing that children like. And they were happy. But most importantly, they were learning. And something struck out for me. I think the first few classes that I had with the children. Remember that I taught chess in private schools for 3 years. But I had never seen children learn at such incredible pace before. And I couldn't believe it, right? Children that couldn't speak English, children that hadn't been to school before. They were showing great aptitude for chess in all its complexities. Now, chess is a very complex game, to be honest, because there are a lot of terminologies that you have to use to describe. But the children got it. They got it, and with time, I realized something. I remember one day we were doing group analysis, and one of the boys just said, "Uncle, this is a prophylactic move." And I just looked at him like this. And the boy's name is Levinus. They brought him from the village. And he used the word prophylaxis because I had mentioned it before. And that stayed with him. And he was learning. And for the first time, I realized that we were giving these children a new kind of education. Now, education to most of us, we understand it to be limited to the confines of these four walls, the classroom. But I tell you today that education beyond these four walls is a capacity for thought, is a capacity for independent thought, for critical thought. And through chess, children were getting some semblance of education even without being in school. And they were getting educated because they were engaging their minds for the first time. I was still poor, but I kept doing it because I had seen that this was deeply impactful. And this was something that was going to stay with them for the rest of their lives. Just like the way chess changed my own life completely. And 2018, 2019, 2020, COVID happened. I just kept doing it. Nobody knew what we were doing, but we're just building. We went there every week, and the children got really good in those years. They started winning tournaments. So people started paying attention. The BBC saw it. They made a documentary. Gradually we were gaining a bit of traction. People were sending us mails from countries all over the world to volunteer, to support. And I was just lost because I didn't even have the competence for that. I was just a chess coach. I didn't build administrative competence to handle partnerships or anything else. I had to start learning, start unlearning. And we just kept doing it. We just kept at it. We just kept doing it. And in December, something changed. And everything just blew up and went viral. We decided to do a new project. We didn't do anything differently. We had just gone from Majidun, around where I grew up, to Makoko, which is the largest floating slum in the world. Then we went to Burkina Faso, then came to Oshodi on that bridge. And this time last year, maybe I had less than 1,000 followers on Twitter. But I was very consistent with one thing. I would share the stories of what we were doing. I just kept sharing the stories. And I realized that whenever I shared the stories, the children would get scholarship because someone would see it and be like, wow, this girl is amazing. She's good at chess. Does she go to school? Oh, how can I support? So through that, we're getting scholarships for children. So chess became not just the end in itself, but a means to several ends. It gave them a way to get education. And that was just the beginning of something that was going to be a phenomenal project. And when we went to Oshodi Under Bridge, it was different because Oshodi Under Bridge, for those that don't live in Lagos, is a criminal hotspot. Like the thugs, area boys, that is where they live. And they've killed people there, they've robbed people, they've stabbed people there. And I went there with this crazy idea that I wanted to teach the children there chess. I remember the first time I got there, they just accosted me, say, Alpha, Kilon Shale. I just had to no, that I'm not here to take pictures or anything. I just want to talk to you guys. And I wasn't condescending. I told them I was just one of them. I wanted to do something. And that was the first real partnership because I'm supposed to discuss strategies, for partnerships with the area boys, the people that we are stereotyped as good for nothing in society, as criminals. But we forget that there's no single story about any people, right? And while the single story might be true, it is not complete. And an incomplete story is worse than a false story. So I knew that wasn't the only story, right? And my understanding of that came from when I was driving in traffic someday, and a little boy walked up to the car, and I was knocking and begging for money. And I didn't have money, so I was trying not to maintain eye contact. So I drove up. I mean, most of us that drive have experienced that at some point. And I felt bad I didn't have money. But then it occurred to me that someday, what that boy didn't get while he was begging was going to get it through violence. For anyone that has been robbed in traffic, you know how they come, bang your windows, and you have to give them what you have, else they will kill you. So how do we lose children from that point where they now evolve into area boys and lose that innocence? And why were we not paying attention to them at that level when they could still be reformed? That was the problem I saw. And no one was paying attention to it. And I said I was going to do something about it. And I took a few chess balls to Oshodi. And we partnered with the area boys by including them in the project. Everyone wants to feel included. And then that's one thing you learn as you continue to advance. Everyone wants to feel included, right? And we included them, we gave them titles. Wasiu, you'll be in charge of teaching, you'll be in charge of arranging tables and chairs. And they felt as a part of something for the first time in their lives. And someone called their names with a purpose, not politicians that use them as pawns for their own selfish gains. But someone called their names for a reason. And I remember what Mark Zuckerberg said about when man wanted to go to the moon for the first time. You know, I think the president there was Kennedy. And he walked into NASA headquarters and saw a cleaner. I said, "What are you doing here, sir?" He said, "I'm helping to send the man to the moon." And it was just a cleaner. But then, he was contributing in his own capacity to send man to the moon because he had felt as a part of something that was much greater than himself. And he just being a cleaner did not limit his understanding of what he was contributing to. And that was the feeling that we gave these talks, these area boys, these criminals. And the project was successful. In fact, it was phenomenal. People from all over the world couldn't believe that children, street kids on that Oshodi Bridge could become chess champions. And it happened. Patrice Evra came to Lagos for the first time because of our project to learn chess from the children. Journalists from all over the world came down to tell the stories of these children who, despite all of this, were able to learn. So the most dangerous ghetto in Lagos became a classroom for children to learn. Paris Hilton reached out. Everyone supported. Everyone believed for the first time that we were all area boys. And I said it that we were all area boys because area boy used to be that derogatory term to stereotype people without understanding that if circumstances were a bit different, it could have been you under that bridge. You were born to a mother that sells paraga in Oshodi. It could have been you. Because life has chosen the script for them. And it's the only script they would ever get to act out. For most of us, education has given us options. Being in a loving family, but a lot of people would never get to enjoy that privilege. And they must choose the only script that life has made available for them. And that was the story I needed the world to know. And people believed it. We sold out this cap about 1,000 a minute because people wanted to be a part of the area boy movement. Because we're all area boys, not because we're thugs or all of that, but because we're all victims of a dysfunctional society, you know, in different degrees. But then it is our responsibility that in whatever privilege that you have, that you use it to help ease the suffering of other people who suffer a lot more than you do. And that is my story. And that is how I've gotten here. I've gotten really famous. I've won more than 10 awards just this year alone. We've made a lot of progress. But this is not about me. This is not about you. This is about you. And I'll leave you with a few things to help you on your own journey. Because it's important for you to know what my journey was. I hope you can take a few things, you know, for your own journey. Because everyone's journey is unique to their identity. And the moment you've figured out what your identity is, you found purpose. You found purpose. And purpose, to keep it very simple, is what you built for. The purpose of this chair is so people can sit on it. Just what you're built and designed for. So find that thing that you're built for, that you've been designed for, that is ingrained in your DNA. It's not too far off from maybe a struggle that you've had, a problem that you've encountered that you need to solve for other people. And that is how the world works. And I want more young people to know that, listen, you can do these things. And I know that sometimes it can be hard. And you are doing all this great work and nobody's paying attention, nobody cares. Maybe you put up something that you care very deeply about and you get just 2 or 3 likes. But listen, the work that you do is going to fill a large part of your life, of your existence. So you must love what you do. You must have complete love, delusional love for what you do, right? It's very important that you do this because the only way to do great work is by loving it completely. And if you haven't found it, keep looking. Don't settle. Don't let people that criticize you and make you change your mind about the things you're passionate about, because no one ever raised the statue, in honor of a critic. And that is the reality of your own existence. You must act like everything you do truly matters and have the courage to impress the world with your identity. Have the courage to impress the world with what you do and who you are. Who could have ever thought that a boring game like chess could become such a transformational tool? But I believed it first before everyone else. And the world had no choice but to believe that same thing. And someday, just someday, you get your moment and the spotlight shine on you. And you get a chance to tell the world what you're truly made of, who you are. Because every time you speak, you're telling the world who you are, right? And when that moment comes, it is important that you're able to prove your mettle, right? Because just like for me, first 3 years are just in the dark. There are years like that. They call them decades when nothing happens. But then there are weeks when decades happen, when it finally happens, and you experience 10 years in just 1 week. And when that decade in a week happens, you will be ready for it. So until then, keep building capacity, keep learning, live your life every day as if it's a miracle. And when greatness comes, you'll be ready for it. And I'll be rooting for all of you. Thank you.